My name is Sarah Zwiep. I'm a geospatial data engineer at Floodbase, and today I'll be talking about why we don't use Zarr yet, or alternatively, how we learned to stop worrying and love the COG. Now, thank you. Now, I realize with this presentation title, I've kind of walked into the lion's den a bit, so just right off the top, I'm going to get out of the way. I'm not a Luddite, at least not for Zarr anyways, and this is not an anti-Zarr presentation. Rather, my hope with this presentation is to communicate two core parts. The first being to be able to communicate Floodbase's NRT, near real-time flood product. I want to talk about the CNG tools that surround that. I want to talk about the data complexities. I want to talk about the infrastructure that we built to support that product. And then second, I want to talk about from the perspective of someone who joined Floodbase after that infrastructure solution was built out and was asked to look at that solution and think about how can we develop it, expand on it, build it out. And from that perspective, I want to talk about some of the pain points or maybe the sticking points that I've gleaned from our team internally about that possible transition, specifically when it comes to data formats. So yeah, TLDR, I'm not a Zarr Luddite. But with that out of the way, I'll be up here for about 15 minutes, leaving 5 minutes at the end for questions, discussions, gentle heckles if need be. And then I'll move quickly into kind of what Floodbase is, what we do. I'll talk about the US daily flood model, the data that it needs, the data that it gives out, and hopefully that'll give us the important context to talk about the current solution that we built out around it, both the good and the bad. After that, I'll move into the coveted why not Zarr yet. Then I'll end on some forward-looking thoughts and some final thoughts there. So about Floodbase, we are a startup based out of New York City. We provide flood data and expertise to support parametric flood insurance and disaster relief programs worldwide. Why do we do this? Flood is the most common natural disaster. According to Swiss Re's latest report, 80% of economic losses caused by flooding globally are uninsured. And you can imagine that lack of insurance means that communities that are already affected by flood disasters in these flood-prone areas are going to feel those effects at a more exasperated rate. And typical indemnity insurance covers economic losses for specific assets. That doesn't nearly cover all the economic losses you see in flood disaster. That's where parametric insurance enters in. And it's sort of like a pulse check in this room, like thumbs up, thumbs down. Who is familiar with the concept of parametric insurance? Wow, that's great. Okay. We're just going to skip on what that is then. Okay, so yeah, we provide a parametric flood insurance solution. How Floodbase fits into that is that we're able to provide historical flood data and statistics to support brokers and carriers in deriving those thresholds that are required for policies. And once a policy is bound, once those T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, then Floodbase is able to provide a near real-time flood data for that AOI. And as you can kind of glean, the core of our data product are these flood extent maps. And when we're generating these flood extent maps in the US, we use our US daily flood model. This model is a proprietary in-house machine learning model, ensemble machine learning model. And what it does is, or what I should say, is this is in credit to the brilliant machine learning engineers at Floodbase. What I can talk about it, or what I can describe about it, is that it produces at 250 meter resolution flood inundation percentage on a standardized grid across CONUS. Our philosophy or our approach to flooding is something that will be talked about a bit more in Han's presentation. It's a multi-modal approach to flood. What that means is we fuse a wide variety of geographic inputs to approach and robustly observe flood characteristics. You can think of the dynamic hydrological inputs as asking how much water should there be in an area. The static geographic inputs then say where should that water be going. And in theory, multimodal flood is great. It's what we should be doing. In practice, it's a huge headache. As you can imagine, when you're approaching a wide variety of data sets, very few of them line up, especially in this field. And so all the data providers, widely different. Native resolution, wildly different. Native format, wildly different. And data availability, widely different. And so this is a bit of chaos. And the extra cherry on top is that when we're providing a near real-time product, this data needs to be monitored in near real time in order to provide inference for bound policies. But despite this chaos, we are still responsible for generating flood extent maps for areas that need it. But keeping that responsibility and the complexity in mind, we can kind of think about the current solution that Floodbase has built out around this product. We can talk about it in terms of the data and then the compute. And so for our data, what we're doing is we're ingesting external data sources like we discussed, as well as generating internally these flood extent maps using our model. And if they're rasters, these are processed to COGs and stored on GCP object storage, other data sets, geoparquets, flat buffers, you name it. And then a stack server is responsible for indexing, ingesting, storing the necessary metadata, and exposing that to our processes. Our processes or our users are exposed or are supported and bolstered up by GCP's data flow. GCP data flow is a managed data service. It does auto-scaling, scheduling, the whole shebang for you. What it allows on our side is that it kind of deals with the infrastructure so that our engineering team, our R&D team can kind of focus on building out those pipelines. And then at the bottom here, the GCP object storage and that stack server interaction, that's where our data conceptualization really comes from. That's where our data model is kind of growing out of. And so if we zoom in a little bit, this slide I don't love that much, but I couldn't figure out a bit of visualization for it. What I really want to get out of this slide is that because of this solution, because of this setup, we have a very modular, simple view of our data. We have a single unit in time. We have our date time for a single grid cell on that standardized grid. It makes it really easy for us to understand how a worker on data flow is going to be grabbing and interacting with that data, how we need to build out our pipelines. And yeah, that even works at scale. So what's working well? The affordance of COGs. We are a small team at Floodbase, and COGs are built on the ubiquitous or almost ubiquitous technology of a GeoTIFF. People understand how to interact and people understand how to interact with this data format. And for a small team, it's really valuable for us to be able to ask questions, debug, and optimize without reducing our bus factor on how we look at our data. The acidity of the Postgres backend, as well as the data safety measures of GCP, that just helps us sleep better at night. We have that simple mental model that's supported by Stack at GCP, transparent and deterministic worker parallelization on data flow. There's the added benefit of this that we also have this seamless integration with our existing infrastructure. And this solution works well for our local research cases as well as our scale production. Now, this is not the perfect solution. This presentation would have a very different vibe if it wasn't. So we have that Postgres to bottleneck. We have a really tired elephant. In our solution, Postgres is kind of the strong middleman. And you can imagine, and I imagine some of the critical ones in this audience are trying to do the math in their head. If we have date time, we have hourly date time COGs all over across CONUS. We even have our ingested data. That is going to be a lot of stack items that we're keeping track of. And we're going to want to be interacting with that data a lot. So that's to the tune of about 80 million stack items. Postgres is beefy. Postgres can be scaled, but the problem is that there's these sort of, in our experience, it's these inflection performances. So we can put some engineering time on Postgres. We can get some, we can implement PG bouncer on it. We can add some more concurrency ability, but that takes engineering hours, and we want a solution that can scale a bit easier than that. We're lower bounded by that daily processing time because we have a single unit of data. We build our pipelines around a daily idea of our data. We can't really go lower than that. Data flow worker operates on a daily timescale. Cloud native I/O. This one is going to hurt a lot to say out loud, but in some of our processes, it's just quicker to download our COGs than to stream them. And so that's just not even cloud native that's not even cloud native, and we would love for that to not be the case. And then the multi-dimensional array to COG pipeline. As you might remember from the table of data inputs, we have a lot of our inputs are in netcdf. We have a lot of people in this field moving further towards Zarr or just keeping netcdf. Our pipeline has us process a lot of these to COG, and that's not ideal. So why not Zarr yet? I have just said all these things. Many of you in the crowd are probably saying, Sarah, so you just use Zarr. You should use Zarr. And I say to that, yeah, maybe. And in theory, definitely. But I mean, we can even look at the challenges that I just listed. That Postgres bottleneck, gone. Daily processing lower bound, we lose a bit of that. We lose the modularity of our view of our data, which is really helpful for our team, but you can start to creep below that lower bound processing time. Cloud native I/O, Zarr is built for that. Multi-dimensional array inputs. If it's Zarr, that's great. If it's not Zarr, you virtualize. Cool. So this is not looking super good for me. This is not looking good for us. But I do want to call back to the benefits of what we started with. We have this affordance of COGs, which I think can be seen as very trivial, but when we have a small company and when you have people on your sales team who are meant to be your sales team, your marketing team, your data analysis team, your R&D team, who are all meant to be able to look at your data, ask questions, this is really valuable. This is a well-known technology, it's mature, and it's, I do love COGs. And the ACID compliance, okay, so that gets that red emoji. We lose that. The ACID compliance of a DB, this gets an hourglass emoji. As you probably guessed by attending some of the other conference talks or workshops, there's solutions to this. We're getting some reactions from the Earth Mover team there. So this is an hourglass. It's in progress. It's not stable yet, so it's not necessarily a solution. By going to Zarr, by adopting this cube shift in our formats, you kind of open yourself up to these changes in data that you weren't necessarily exposed to with COG. Transparent worker parallelization. This one I'm not super sure about, so would love to hear some discussion around it. This one gets an hourglass because I do understand there's projects to address this, but it's still a work in progress. You don't get as much clarity about what single workers' jobs are, and so it's a bit harder to optimize that. And you see your bus factor greatly reduce. Suddenly, if I'm the only one concerned with or having the slightest idea about how a chunk can affect your speed, that is not ideal. Not everyone on the engineering team is going to be familiar with how that works and affects your process. The simple modular data model, this gets a shrug emoji because this might be an us problem, but this modular view of our data has really helped us in thinking about how we approach our data pipelining. It's been really useful on our data flow solution. And if we transition to Zarr, do we then lose the ability for people outside of our core geospatial technical team to think about our data? And then infrastructure simplicity, this is another hourglass. There are many solutions out there to try to make this infrastructure problem simple, but the reality is that we have data flow and we have GCP in our existing systems. If we introduce something else, that is going to be that's going to be some complexity. And so that's kind of where we land in this why not Zarr yet, and that's where Floodbase lands. We have stakeholder-facing products. We have those bound policies where we need to be generating every hour new flood extent maps. Those require careful technical evolution. And there's a lot of green check marks, as you saw. But there's also, on the other side, these things that we lose that we're still thinking about, these hourglasses. And so it's an evolving trade-off as Zarr development presses forward. Maybe the scales will tip, but for right now, we're a not yet. And then where we're headed and final thoughts. I think Zarr's really cool. So on my end, there's sort of Zarr proof of concept experiments that are happening internally to see where it might fit in the solution, what complexities that would introduce, what it would take on our side to transition, and asking the question of if it's worth it. Because right now, this solution works for us and it works well. It can scale. But regardless of that, there's also these stack updates that we're really excited about. Engineering team is looking beyond PG for scalability. Please don't ask me about that. That's engineering's thing. And then I'm also coming to this conference trying to learn more, trying to discuss more, working on the education part of things. But for now, we are taking advantage of the affordances of what is a ubiquitous technology, and we are learning to love the COG. So, yeah. And if there's any questions or heckles or things like that, would love to hear that. So, floor is yours. Yeah.
Sorry, great talk, Sarah. Is there any reason why you don't use, or I don't know, do you use weather radar data within your model?
We don't know.
And any reasons, or just because you decide not to use it?
I don't think I can speak to that, but I can definitely follow up with my team for sure. I think that would be more of like the deep science R&D side of the team, but we can definitely talk about that afterwards.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
Hi, I was wondering how like the data model and architecture you shared interfaces with like the R&D and modeling aspect when they need to like iterate on model outputs very quickly and test out new approaches.
So that's one of the benefits of the solution is because we're built on top of an Apache Beam kind of pipeline work, that's just run locally. We have a kind of beefy remote computer that our R&D team iterates our model development on, and the training's done there. And then once we kind of quickly iterate through those things, we can push them out of production on the same system.
Oh, okay, like a local just Beam runner.
Totally, exactly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no heckles.
Hi, Joe.
I promise. It was a great talk. I loved every minute of it. It was so
Okay,
good.
Thanks.
I'm curious if you ever need to do time series analysis across all of these COGs. And surely, I assume you would. I'm a hydrologist by training, so I know that eventually you're going to want to pull one pixel out from every COG, and that's going to hurt.
Yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
I'm sure you've had to build something for this. I'm curious if you can tell us what you've had to build to do that.
Yeah, so the answer is we for sure have to do time series. Like we have to get from these flood extent maps that you see in the far right corner to this annual time series of annual max flood, which when you're looking at the historic data, that helps you determine the thresholds. So generating the time series is a really big part of it. And it's one of the reasons why we're even giving this talk, why we're thinking about Zarr, why we're considering Zarr, because it is like, yeah, we have 16,000 COGs. We use our stack server to kind of bring them into, we conceptualize them as a cube. I've even been visualizing this as a cube. So what we've done is we have built out a pipeline to work on a daily scale. So you get 8 hours or 12 hours, depending on if you're in the historic or the present moment. And each worker reduces those, gets its own like mini time series, tosses those back into the larger scale, and then you just sum over them. Yeah.
So there's no kind of a MapReduce approach to...
No, it seems like the build out is like a systematic MapReduce, almost like we've kind of built out our own version of it. Yeah. Cool. I think I'll call it there. Thanks, everyone.